Electricity is a very important subject in physics. Electricity is associated with many fascinating phenomena in nature, as well as observed by using some man-made apparatus. For centuries, many great physicists, as well as the ordinary person, had been worked out many great ideas, as well as some crazy ideas, to explain the electricity-related phenomena. Over the past 2 years, I also had made several dozens of the short videos on electricity. But today I'm going to talk about electricity again in response to a recent experiment on electricity made by a popular YouTuber. Welcome to Young Tuition. This is a unique channel to explore, study, and share the knowledge about the basic issues in physics and beyond. Let's go to the blackboard. My topic today is implication of Veritasium's new experiment on electricity. However, 5 months ago, Veritasium published a video on electricity, claiming that there are many misconceptions about electricity. After that, many YouTubers, including myself, has published many videos to his claims. Instead of doing more homework on the critiques from the various YouTubers, Veritasium spent these 5 valuable months to hire a senior engineer from LIGO to repeat experiment previously done by another YouTuber, Alpha Phoenix. So what did they observe? This is his experimental result, in which the green colored curve represents the voltage across the battery, while the yellow curve represents the voltage across the resistor, representing the light bulb. It is apparent a two-stage build-up of the voltage across the resistor can be seen. In the first period, that the voltage is lower, but eventually the voltage will reach to the steady state value, which is equal to the voltage of the power supply. It is interesting to notice that Veritasium took this experimental result as kind of the evidence in support of many claims he made in his first video. Is that true? Before we go further, let's have a look of the earlier experimental result made by Alpha Phoenix, in which two-stage voltage built up across the resistor were observed, although in different time scale. Why? Because the experimental setup are identical, except for the length of the conductor wire used. Next, let's analyze his experimental result in more detail. Here I had added a proper time scale based on their experimental conditions. In general, the time-dependent phenomena can be divided into 2 stages. One is a transient stage, in which the 2 voltages are time-dependent. As time getting longer than 100 nanoseconds, the voltage became time-independent. It is clear that the voltage across the battery can be measured in less than 1 nanosecond. Some oscillation can also be observed. This oscillation somehow is transferred to the voltage detected across the resistor. After 13 nanoseconds, the onset of the second voltage signal can be observed. It is interesting to notice that this time interval 13 nanosecond repeatedly appeared in the features of this observed time series. It is very interesting to notice that the measured voltage occur almost simultaneously after the switch is on. There was no time delay whatsoever as far as this experimental data shows. From here, you can see the voltage across the resistor in the first stage is about 3.8 volt. Well, it took about 5 nanoseconds to reach to that value. However, the time taken for the light travel across the two parallel metal wire is about 3.3 nanosecond. Clearly, the first voltage across the resistor started building up prior to the arrival of the first photon or electromagnetic wave from the source. That would take over 3 nanoseconds. So this is very important observation if this phenomena can be repeatedly observed. There must be some informal or information must be transferred from somewhere to that local electron in order to explain this observed phenomena. This is some preliminary modeling I used in order to describe the observed oscillation apart from that exponential build-up process. Return to that timeline. After the arrival of the first electromagnetic wave at about 13 nanoseconds, the second voltage across the resistor called VR2 starts building up. Again, this must be instructed by somebody or somehow in order to generate this overshot. Another time point of interest is 33 nanosecond. That is the time taken for something travel at light speed from the battery to the bulb through the non-wire. So that is some quantitative analysis of his experimental result. I also added this color bar to illustrate that characteristic time interval, namely 13 nanosecond. Can you see? This is a periodical phenomenon. This is the first 13 nanosecond. This is the second, is the third, is the fourth, and is the fifth. It would appear that that time interval, 13 nanosecond, is very important time constant. So how do we explain this 13 nanosecond? Well, if you just double this 13 nanosecond, you would getting very close to the time taken for anything traveling at the speed of light from the battery to the bulb via the wire. So it is just half of the time taken. Well, similar phenomena has been observed by Alpha Phoenix 4 months ago. Here is the result. Can you see? So what he did next, he just cut the remote connection so that these became completely open parallel wire, similar to the antenna. In this case, he did his measurement, although he didn't discuss much. Actually, I expected to see his result immediately after he published his video. He still remains silent for some reason, unknown. This is his result. As expected, once the electron or anything reach to the open end, suddenly the voltage across the resistor in the first stage drop, and eventually after several oscillations at this characteristic period, they reach to 0. This is something quantitative. Can you see? The time taken in alpha phonics experiment is about 3.3 microsecond. And the period he observed for the first voltage across the resistor is also half, very close to the half of that time. In order to explain this new phenomena, I have proposed several new concepts. One, electromagnetic induction of the second kind. The electrical current and the induced electrical current are opposite in direction. Okay. Therefore, their generated magnetic field is also opposite in direction. So this is consistent with Lenz's law, right? Now, this is just a local effect. If I just zoom out to get the big picture, and you can see that these phenomena can be easily explained if we imagine there is a discharging capacitor and the induced current can be measured by using galvanic meters. So this is my explanation. This is something new. Besides, Veritasium should understand that the situation, the transient situation, he observed that the build-up of the first voltage prior to the second voltage is nothing to do with ordinary battery. Obviously, the time-dependent behavior of the voltage are different. In the case of the capacitor, the charge drops very quickly. Therefore, the charge is apparently time-dependent. In this case, you can invoke Maxwell's displacement current. However, in the case of the real battery, the voltage across positive and negative electrodes are almost time independent. Therefore, it is incorrect in his first video to claim that there is a magnetic field induced by the displacement current. Therefore, it is incorrect to invoke the Poynting vector. Here, I would like to point it out. Veritasium has his proposition, that is, electrical energy must be transported from the battery to the light bulb. Hence, based on these premises, he argues that if we cannot explain energy transferring in the wire because of the drifting speed of the electron is too slow, then they must go through electrical field. Of course, this argument is based on his premises that energy must be transferred from the source to the electrical appliance. As I have explained in my subsequent videos, I have shown that there is no electrical energy transferred from the power plant to the electrical appliances. In fact, there is no energy traveling along the power line. Similarly, low energy transfer in the transformers. This is merely due to the electromagnetic induction in which electron in another coil is forced to accelerate due to the presence of time-dependent field of other coil. Perhaps it's also necessary to point it out that Veritasium and several YouTubers have been trying to persuade people to believe that the electrical energy can be transported from the source to another place in space. This is originated from the Tesla's idea. Do you remember? Tesla imagined that electrical energy exists in nature. So by using some simple or powerful devices, such as his tower and the coil, then we can activate the energy. And we can utilize this kind of energy to do lot of work. But unfortunately, as I had discussed, this idea is groundless. I have discussed this phenomena in my video. If you are interested, please go there, have a look. In short, there is no energy transfer from the source to another place. You cannot transport electrical energy in that way. Veritasium and other YouTubers want people to believe that the energy can be transported from one place to another. In the advent of the climate change, have been trying to persuade people to accept this crazy idea: the electrical energy can be beamed out, can be transported from one place to another, such as from satellite to the Earth, or even from the moon to the Earth, which is not true. Return to Veritasium's premises. You might ask, whether did Veritasium got his idea? Well, that is another big issue in physics. Traditionally, electricity can be perfectly described by the charge and the force. In addition, electrical potential energy can be explicitly written as -1/4 pi epsilon Q multiplied Q and R divided by R. So this is a very direct, that is a standard description in electromagnetism. However, due to the demand to developing so-called quantum field theory, electrical field has been considered as an entity which possesses the energy or carry out electrical energy. Interesting enough, the pointy vector was introduced and has been still applied in many quantum field theory. That is based on the assumption that electromagnetic energy somehow is stored or carried out by electromagnetic wave. But even for the Maxwell himself, he was reluctant to accept this idea because apparently, where does such energy reside? That was his original question, see. So this is a non-story. If you want to know, please watch my other video on quantum field theory, in which that the basis for introducing Lagranges is come from this formula for energy density of the electromagnetic energy stored or carried out by electromagnetic wave. Of course, this is based on electromagnetic wave, but return to the first video by Veritasium. He was talking about primarily about the DC circuit in which the voltage across the battery is time independent. How could that energy can travel in the absence of time dependent electromagnetic wave? So that is a big misconception. So far, Veritasium refused to acknowledge. It is very serious because he's so popular over the internet. So every word he uttered will influence millions of viewers. Finally, let's talk about the conclusion of this talk. The key 3 point is no energy flows in wire and electromagnetic field. Second, electromagnetic information might travel faster than light. Third, Veritasium's description of electricity is wrong. Electrical energy cannot be transmitted from the source to any electrical appliance because the work is done by the local electrons inside a node accelerated by the applied electrical potential difference. So the power plant or power pulse is merely responsible to build that potential across the resistor instantaneously at the transient stage and constantly during the steady state. If you like this video, please like and make some comments and subscribe this channel. And also please tell your friends to subscribe this channel. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Goodbye.